His reviews will get you further than the film will ever go. If you give him just a moment of your time, he'll let you know which movies rock, which movies stink, which movies shouldn't have been released. Say hello to Confused Matthew.
Now this is an interesting position for me to be in. When reviewing this movie, I am forced to comment on two things that I don't know very much about. One is documentary filmmaking, and the other is the world of bodybuilding. Pumping Iron is a documentary which tracks a few competitors through the 1975 Mr. Olympia bodybuilding competition. The competitors include Lou Ferrigno a few years before he became the Incredible Hulk, and a very young Arnold Schwarzenegger decades before he would become the governor of my state. To be perfectly honest, I don't watch very many documentaries. They just aren't a medium that I care very much about. But it seems to me that a good documentary should look in an unbiased way into a world that the audience might not be familiar with, and at the same time to teach you something about that world that you didn't already know. And if that criterion is correct, then this was a very successful documentary. I had no idea what these people did in order to even compete in a competition like this, let alone prepare for that competition. But these people pour their time and souls into this, sometimes without a lot of payoff. Some of these contestants have been competing for years only to earn gradual steps towards having the slightest chance at the big time, and all the while not making a whole lot of money in the process. We also get a very inside look at Arnold in competition mode, and you might be surprised by what you see and hear from him. At one point he remarks that if his competitors turn out to be better than him, he will get in a room with them the night before the competition and simply talk them into losing. We also learn that Schwarzenegger missed his own father's funeral because he didn't want to lose focus on an upcoming competition. You have to admire the man's dedication in a way, but still, that's a little extreme for me. I mean, it's his life, but really, his own father's funeral? Clearly, Arnold is in this to win. Now, I'm not the most sports-oriented guy in the world, so this is all a little over my head anyway, but to be honest, bodybuilding doesn't even seem like much of a sport to me. It's more like a male beauty pageant. The contestants work hard, harder than most probably, but they aren't building themselves up to fight or otherwise use their bodies for a competition. They are only to be looked at. This puts them in the arena of an amazing car that no one drives, in my opinion. It's pretty, but what's the point? I suppose you can't come away from a film like this without developing some sort of an opinion about the subject, so here is what I, in my own personal opinion, came away with. These people are wasting their lives. They're sinking a lot of time and effort into something with all aesthetic and no functionality. I just don't understand how anyone could possibly find bodybuilding worthwhile or fulfilling. But interestingly enough, that actually comes up in the documentary. Arnold at one point remarks that a lot of people will likely find what he does strange, but he feels the same way about racing. You build a car to get from one point to another as fast as possible. That's strange to him. Maybe there are bodybuilders out there who will watch my reviews and think what I'm doing is a waste of my life. I'm sinking all my time and energy into watching other people's works and talking about other people's works. I suppose that's where the phrase, "to each his own," was born. Here's an interesting little piece of information that I literally just looked up. Apparently the filmmakers outright admitted that parts of the movie were staged to make it look more interesting. This changes my review considerably. Now I have to question whether this film even constitutes a documentary at all. Apparently the bits that were staged were to try to create a good guy, bad guy environment with Arnold as the bad guy and presumably Ferrigno as the good guy. Though it was said later on that Arnold's story about not attending his father's funeral never happened, a few sources testify that he wasn't there, so who knows. All I can say about the parts that were staged is that they didn't look staged, so I guess they were successful in their efforts, but it's hard to take this film seriously in retrospect knowing that parts were just a setup. Staged or no, the film does have two serious problems for me: pace and repetition. At times it felt like we were watching the same scenes over and over again. At times it felt like we were hearing the same lines over and over again. Bodybuilding and beauty pageants have always come off as a little thin for me, and maybe this is a sign that I was correct in that assessment. Maybe the sport is so thin that there just isn't that much to say about it, even from the contestants. As for the pace, the film does tend to slow up in a lot of areas, especially in the training scenes. When we aren't listening to these people talk about their experience, we are forced to watch them train, or sometimes just stand around in a corner, and it can be a little daunting. Still, the interview portions of the film are fairly interesting, and staged or not, the film does a good job of getting you invested in who wins the competition in the end. Ultimately, I found the film to be average. Out of 100 different topics, bodybuilding was probably 100 on my list of interests before this film, and it didn't move from that spot afterwards. I suppose if you like documentaries about obscure subjects such as this, you might consider giving it a go. For my part, I can't imagine a reason to ever watch this film again for the rest of my life, but that's just me. I suppose this is just the way of the world. Viewers view, reviewers review, and bodybuilders bodybuild. The end.